most of our learning should be Panacea, Mirfa Shlema, Masim Ben Sarah. Okay, let's start. We'll start from Rav Ashi Masni. It's 9 lines from the bottom. What happened was, if someone shechs the carbon Pesach, discussing anyway, someone that shechs the carbon outside the base of Mikdash, it's called the Shchuti Chut. He shechted it outside the base of Mikdash. So that's a prohibition if that carbon was supposed to be in the base of Mikdash. But if it had a different problem, it wasn't supposed to be in the base of Mikdash either, so then you don't have the prohibition of Shchuti Chut. So what happens if you shech the carbon Pesach the rest of the year? So if it's a carbon Pesach, then there's a problem. Now, if there's a problem, then that means you don't have a problem, because then it's not Shchuti Chut. Right? Then it's not shechting a carbon outside the base of Mikdash. However, if there is no problem, because we'll consider it a shlamim, then you have a problem that you've just done Shchuti Chut. Right? So the question is, what happens with this carbon Pesach? So we had different views. We had Ravin came and he said that whether you shechted it as a carbon Pesach, which that would tell me that it's invalid. And if it's invalid, then you don't have a problem of slaughtering an animal outside the big image. Or whether you slaughtered it as a shlamim, which is a peace offering, which that is always valid. You can always bring a peace offering. It doesn't have to be a Pesach. So then it would be valid, which means that it is Shchuti Chut. In both of those cases, Rabin said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan that you're going to be chayiv. Comes along Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi masni chayiv. Kidamrinan, as we taught. Rav Yirmiyah midifni masni pater. Rav Yirmiyah midifni, he says that in both of those cases, you're actually exempt. The carbon, it can't be a carbon Pesach because it's not Erev Pesach, and it's not a shlamim either, and so therefore you're exempt. Kasavar Pesach b'shayim ma'aseh boy akira. He holds that in order to turn a Pesach into a shlamim, you have to have intention to turn it into a shlamim. And well, so what? Maybe he had this. We're giving all the options here. Maybe he had an intention to turn it into a shlamim. How did you intend to turn it into a shlamim? You slaughtered it outside the base of Mikdash as a shlamim. Outside the base of Mikdash, your intention doesn't change the carbon. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that are invalid here. We're looking at invalidities and seeing how they're going to add up. Okay. And that argues on Rav Chilke Bar Tuvi because Rav Chilke Bar Tuvi said that if it's Shalei Lishmai, if you had intention to turn this animal into a shlamim, then it's actually effective. It does become a shlamim, which means that then there's now a prohibition of slaughtering the animal outside the temple. All right? Okay, we got to do that. Amar Mar. I have a carbon.
Just to eat it.
No, when you designate the animal, it becomes sanctified. The animal becomes a carbon. You can't really do anything else with it other than bring it as a carbon. So if you bring it as a carbon Pesach, Shalei L'Shmai is possible. So you have to, it's the designation here, that's the issue. Consecration. Amar Mar.
Tell Donnie that that's the question you asked. Why can't we just barbecue?
Oh, you just reminded me. I saw Gedalia in the line.
No. Thank you.
I recognized it. Okay, Amar Mar. He tells me, I see pictures of you. I'm not sure, I guess from Yetzi's camera. Amar Mar, we learned before. Mishahigril Aleim, the master Torah. Mishahigril Aleim Chayev. Chayev al Shem. Upater al Shalazazo. Okay. It's a similar discussion just with the animals of Yom Kippur. What happens? We have two goats. One is supposed to be brought as a korban chatas, and one is supposed to be pushed off the cliff, right? Azazel. So before you do the goyrol, they're not eligible. Once you do the goyrol, so we're talking about taking these animals and sacrificing them outside the temple, which is a prohibition, right? But only if they're eligible to be brought would there be a prohibition of sacrificing them outside the temple. But if they weren't eligible to be brought, they're not prohibiting. So once once you did the lottery, then Chayev al Shal Shem, it's eligible to be brought as a sacrifice. We know which one is the korban chatas. If that's shechted outside the Beis Hamikdash, that's shchutei chutz. That's a prohibition. That's clear in the Torah, which we're going to see. And korban needs to be brought to the Beis Hamikdash. Upater al Shal Azazel, but you're going to be exempt from Azazel. That's what we learned. That korban is going to be exempt if you slaughter it outside the temple. Okay, Tana Rabbanan, we have a brisa. The brisa starts off with the pasuk. It says, "Ish mi beis Yisrael sheyishchat shorei kesel v'yeiz b'machana, or sheyishchat michutz l'machana, vel pesach hayomayir le'heviu l'hakriv korban l'Hashem." This should have been the introduction to the whole discussion. It says, any man from the Jewish people that will slaughter an ox or a lamb or a goat in the camp, or he slaughters outside the camp, but he did not bring to the entrance to the tent of meeting to bring the sacrifice. So the pasuk says, the brisa explains the pasuk. It says, "Ikarban." If it would say karban, shemeyani afilu kachi bedekabayis, shenikru karban. We're missing a small piece of the Teres Kainim that Rashi fills in for us. The pasuk does say karban, and it uses the word karban. If it would just say karban, then I would think that even things that are consecrated just for the temple fund, called bedekabayis, shenikru karban, shenema v'nikra v'skarban Hashem. So I would think that slaughtering those outside the temple is a problem. So the pasuk says he did not bring them to the tent of meeting. That means he did something wrong. Only something that was supposed to be in the tent of meeting is a problem. That means only something that was supposed to go to the Azara. Yeah, the bedekabayis could be sold or whatever. Get to mum. Yeah, how could it be bedekabayis? It has to be that it was an animal that had a mum. Otherwise, an animal would automatically become a korban.
You can designate an animal for a covered and it could still get. And
then it would get a mum.
And then it would no longer go.
And then you would sell it, and the money would go to as a korban, right? How to have an
you wouldn't get another animal.
You would get another with that money. You would get another animal. But how would you have an original animal that was by the kabayas? And it had to be that it had a mum before it. Yeah. So, I would be excluding at that point any sacrifice that wasn't coming to the tent of meeting. I wouldn't know about Rashi takes out the paras kapos. Take out the paras kapos. Okay, we'll follow Rashi. Yeah, that makes sense. You ready? Yeah, Rashi says like sinan. Don't have that. So don't take out. Don't exclude Sara Mishtaleach, which is eligible to come to the tentative meeting. I would not have known that. So, which means like this, that the Sara Mishtaleach, that's the goat that pushed off the cliff. Is that considered a sacrifice that comes to the tentative meeting? Well, it does come to the tentative meeting because it comes into the courtyard and we do a lottery on it. So I would think that would be included in this. But don't exclude that. The Talmud Leimer Lashem, Pasuk says, yes, exclude it. And which means that there's no prohibition of slaughtering that outside the tentative meeting, because the only thing that has a prohibition of shchutei chutz, the things that are going to Hashem. Mishim yichadim Hashem, yatzu elu shein yichadim, yatzu elu shein yichadim, l'shem, l'Hashem. Okay, no, so we have a question. Yatzu elu shein yichadim l'Hashem, l'shem. Okay. So Lashem tells me to exclude this carbon that goes to Azazel. It's sort of like a riot in the Ramban's shot. No, yeah, no, the Ramban quotes in Ibn Ezra that says about Kesar Azazel. Ibn Ezra gives you a little riddle. He says, at 33, I'll tell you. And the Ramban says, the Ibn Ezra means 33 is if you count 33 psukim off from the pasuk of Azazel. So over there it says La yizbach lasirim, don't slaughter animals to demons. He says that the Ibn Ezra's understanding that Azazel was once a year we give a sacrifice to the demons. Azazel was like, it wasn't like Hashem. I mean, that's what it looks like here. At least from this Gemara, it's sort of like a proof. It says La Hashem, only sacrifices that go to Hashem. I guess it would be like something for Klipa or something, I'm not sure exactly how it's explained it. But only something that's for Hashem would be excluded. And only something that's for Hashem would be prohibited. This is taking out, the Sur Lazazel would not have a prohibition of shchutei chutz. And where are we getting this from? Because it says Lashem.
So if it doesn't have a prohibition, it can be turned and be used as a sort of misplay. I'm not understanding.
No, we're talking about
following what they're
talking about if someone slaughters an animal outside the Beis Hamikdash.
Yes.
Now, if it's a korban, then that's a prohibition.
Right.
Let's say it's a Sar HaMishtaleach.
It's slaughtered.
Sar HaMishtaleach is never slaughtered.
It's pushed
off the cliff.
Right.
So what about that? If you slaughtered it, is that considered a korban that was supposed to be inside the Beis Hamikdash? So it says, well, on one hand, it does go inside the Beis Hamikdash, but not for slaughtering, just for a girl. So it is brought to the tentative meeting. So maybe that would go under that category. But then it says, no, it has to be brought to Hashem. So that means it's not under that category. So now we're left with that the Sar HaMishtaleach does not go under the prohibition of slaughtering an animal outside the Beis Hamikdash. You're asking because it's not slaughtered anyway. That's the
It's a practical matter.
Well, the practical side would be if someone takes this animal and slaughters it outside the Beis Hamikdash. There's a prohibition of doing that. For any other sacrifices, it is prohibited.
I understand that, but the argument is that if someone takes this one goat on Yom Kippur and walks it outside, takes a knife.
Right.
How could that happen? That's my wondering.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the concern? The people would start up with the guy that was taking him out. Who would start up? Did we learn that yet? No, someone was They would start up with the guy that was walking the goat out. They would pull his hair. They had to make a ramp for him. It was complications. So somehow they got slaughtered. I don't know if it ever happens. Right. If it would happen. The Gemara asks, "Well, Hashem lied to you." The word Lashem is going to be excluding. For a minute, there's a problem. There's a contradiction. We have another brisa that says, "Yiratze," quotes a pasuk, "Yiratze lekarban isha Lashem." It will be an appeasement as a karban, a fire to Hashem. Elu ishim. These are things that are brought on the fire. Minayin shla yakishenu mechusar zman. How do you know that you can't consecrate it earlier than it's supposed to be? I guess it means like before the 8th day. You know, an animal is supposed to be 8th day old. Hamalaymar karban la Hashem. Hamalaymar karban. Hamalaymar karban. La Hashem. Then it says La Hashem. The Rabbi Sar Mishtaleach. That's coming to include the Sar Mishtaleach. There's a big problem. The goat.
It says fire.
Oh, yeah, that's a problem.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a good point. So the problem here is that we have the word Lashem in another context is coming to include the Sarah Mishtaleah, not to exclude Sarah Mishtaleah. Amarava, Rava says, Hasam in Yana Dekra, Vacham in Yana Dekra. Over there, you have to look at the context of the pasuk, and over here, you have to look at the context of the pasuk. Hasam, over there, Del Pesach L'Rabbis. It would have been including everything because it says anything that's brought to the tent of meeting. So if it's including everything, then the word Lashem would have been more exclusive, and that would be excluding something. Lashem Lahaitzi. But over here, Hacha, the Isha Lahaitzi. Over here, you're right. The Gemara says that Isha, the fire, would have excluded it because it's not brought on the fire, right? It's only things that are brought on the fire. So if that's the case, then La Hashem is an extra word because I would have already excluded the Sar La Azazel, which is not brought on the fire. So La Hashem is L'Rabbis. So in that context, the word Hashem is including. Yeah, there goes that Evan Ezra's pshat. How could La Hashem be including Karban La Azazel? Right? I thought we had a raya, but okay. Taima, the Rabbi Rachmana. The whole reason why we would have this included, the Sarah Mishtaleach would be included, is because it gets included because of the word Lashem. Halay Rabbi. But if it wasn't included, then Hava Amin. I would have thought, if I didn't have a clear pasuk, Hava Amin Asar Mishtaleach Kadosh the Mechusar Zman. I would have thought that the Asar Mishtaleach gets consecrated before its time. How could it be before its time? What is it referring to? It must be before the lottery. Va'ina Girl Kevei Ala Barai L'Shem. I think what the Gemara is saying here, correct me if you see in the translation, I think what it's saying is that we're learning that I would have understood that certain karbanas, that by most karbanas, they need to be already 8 days old. Sar Mishdaleach was excluded from that. But because of a pasuk, because it says La Hashem, which excluded that. When is it acceptable to Hashem? Only if it's in the right time, if it's 8 days old. If the animal is under 8 days, right? Then it would not be eligible. The Sarah Mishtaleach, on the other hand, would not have been in that category. It wasn't slaughtered anyway, it was pushed off the cliff. However, the pasuk tells me that it is included. Because it says La Hashem. That pasuk includes it. Now, the Gemara is asking, what would I have thought without the word La Hashem? I would have said that the Sar, the goes to Azazel, would have been acceptable under 8 days old. Now I have a problem. I would have to do a lottery. And they're supposed to be the same, the two animals are supposed to be the same. Now, the lottery would only work if the other one is there. I need to have another one there. Now, how do I have another one there and do a lottery if the other one isn't eligible? Because if they're both on, the other one is actually a real sacrifice. It says Ein Hagirel Keveya Leberoy Lashem. The other one would have needed to be eligible. You see, the lottery needs to be that I don't know which one the lottery is going to fall on. You can say, well, if this one's to Azazel, then that would be acceptable, and if this one's to, because if the lottery works out the other way, then it didn't. That's not a real lottery, right? The lottery has to have the options of falling on either side. So how is this going to work? The girl wouldn't have established it, unless the one that's for Lashem was eligible to be Lashem, which means it needs to be old enough. So what do I need this whole pasuk for? I would have thought that it could have been a Sar Lazazel without having another one that could have been Royal Lashem for a Chatas. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Amani, Rabbi Yosef says, who is the author of this? Hanan HaMitzri. Hanan HaMitzri. The Tanya was taught in a Brisa. Hanan HaMitzri is going to remove the girl from being the determining here. He's going to find us an example where I'm able to get a goat that's a Sar Mishtaleach without doing a girl. And that would resolve the issue. The problem is the Sar Lashem has to be eligible. And the Sar Lazazel doesn't need to be eligible. So, but it's impossible to make a lottery when one is eligible, one's not. It's already determined, right? So he says, maybe talking about, let's say you had the two goats, you did everything correct, you did a lottery, and then it died. The Sar for Azazel died. So it says, even if I've already slaughtered the Sar Lashem and the blood is in the cup, I can bring another animal and just say, okay, this will now be, it'll be cup with the Sar. I'll match it up. Now, okay, I have another goat. How old is that goat? So that goat, without the pasuk, would have been allowed to be under 8 days.
So it's just saying you wouldn't need to do a girl?
The girl was for the second one. You don't need a girl.
You don't need a girl.
Yeah.
So that's what it's saying.
Yeah. You don't need the girl for the replacement. That's the way out of getting one of them that's not really eligible, and it would have still been acceptable without the pasuk.
Even though we had a mission over here.
It said that they need to be the same.
It's saying that must be a girl, they have to be brought in pairs.
Right.
Because now you've used up one half of the pair. You have to replace the other half.
Right. According to Hanan HaMitzri, you don't need a new girl.
The alternative would be to bring two more goats.
Right.
And do a girl again.
Right. In the Mishnah, we just had Nishbach, right? We didn't have the one died. Yeah, in the Mishnah, we had exactly this case, and we said differently. You have to bring another pair. Okay. So the Gemara says, "Ema de shamate l'chanan hamitzri, the less lay the chuya." Chanan hamitzri is just saying that I don't say that this blood that's already in the cup is now ineligible and that it's invalid. I don't say that. That's his point. Let's say agrola mishamatli, but does he say that I don't do a girdle either? He didn't actually say that you don't do a girdle. You're reading into that because he says that there's blood already in the cups. I already used that. Maybe he wants you to take two animals, do a girdle. The one that goes Lazazel will be the one Lazazel. The one that goes Lashem will have to wait to get a mum or whatever, and you do something else with it. And
you can sell it.
if there's a mum and sell it, yeah, there's a chatas, there's problems, but we'll see. The Dilma Maisi Maga, yeah, you wait till it gets a mum, and you use the blood, but it doesn't say that you don't do a girdle. You're jumping to a conclusion here, and he doesn't say that. Leslie Agrala Mishamatli. Dilma Maisi Maga. Maybe you bring it and do a girdle. Elam Rabbi Yosef tries again. He was the one that suggested it was Hanan Mitzri. He tries again. He says, Hamani Reb Shimoni. The Tanya was studying a brisa. One of them dies. Maybe Chavir Shlei B'Hagrala. Okay. Beautiful. One of them dies, you bring the other one without a girdle. Reb Shimon spells it out. And that's okay. So it is possible that we're bringing a goat without a lottery. Okay. Ravina Amar, every step of the way that I'm getting is like the chiddush. Got it. Ravina says, Kagain, Shehumam, Nechilalu Alacha. What are we looking for over here? We're looking for Mechusar Zman. We're looking for an ineligible Sari Mishtaleya. He says, for example, the Sari Mishtaleya got a mum. So what we did was we exchanged it for another one. We did the girdle, but it got a mum. So we say, okay, so we'll just put the kedusha of this onto another one. Once it gets a mum, we'll be machal it onto another animal. How old is that animal? Well, we're talking about that it was ineligible, so it's under 8 days. And then we would have understood that it would have been acceptable if not for the pasuk. And we not tamra the pasuk beimuma. That's a good question. How do you know that a Sar Mishtaleach has mumim at all? I mean, it's not sacrificed. It's pushed off the cliff. Maybe a mum doesn't matter, right? The Tanya started in a brisa. V'isha le'sitnu me'em, and so the fire you shall not give from them. That's the animal with the mum. Elo achalavim. What is from them? That means you shouldn't put the fats on the fire. Ainli alakulan. I would think that's only all the fats. Miksasan minayin. How do you know even a little bit cannot go on the fire if the animal had a mum? Talmulaymar mehem, from them. Then the pasuk says mizbeach. Anyone have the full pasuk in the Gemara? It could be in this Gemara. Yeah. Okay. Averes. This means blind. Shavar. Broken bone. A charotz. A yabelas. A garav. A yalefes. All of these are warts and different types of things that are a mum. You can't bring them from them to fire. Don't bring it as a sacrifice. And a fire should not be on the altar to Hashem.
I think it's a word they can include.
No. It's the animal. The Kainim have other movement, but I don't know if they're the same. Okay. There we have that. You got to look that up. So, Mizbeach Zuzirikas Damim. This is the sprinkling of the blood. Lashem, what is Lashem coming to include? The Rabbi Sar Mishtaleah. Yeah. It's coming to include the Sar Mishtaleah also cannot get a mum. it has a mum, there's a problem. The Yitzchak Lemichta Balmum, the Yitzchak Lemichta Mechususman. You see, what happened here is we just did this twice. We just had La Hashem was including the Sar Mishtalayim. Who was quoting that? That was a brisa. That said, no. That was a brisa that was talking about Yerotza. That only once it's 8 days old could it be brought as a sacrifice. Shivas Yom Yamimai, right? We read it on Yom Tov, Kol B'char. That pasuk over there says that for 7 days it needs to be with its mother, and on the 8th day it could be brought as a sacrifice. It depends which sacrifice. There's certain sacrifices are brought within the first year. They become days and have to be within the first year. Then there's other sacrifices that could be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. I'm not sure how old this started. I'm not sure. Right. So based on that, if it's not floated anyway, maybe it wouldn't need a mum. And we're also maybe, if it's not floated anyway, maybe it doesn't need to be 8 days old. So now it's saying that it does need to be 8 days old, and it does need to be pure from a mum. And I have two sources that include both of them. And the Gemara is saying, why do you need both? Once you included that it can't have a mum, and maybe once you included that it needs to be 8 days old, I would have understood the other one. It says, because of if it would have only said that it needs to be eligible in time, well, fact is, it's not old enough. But a Balmum, the Matzah Zimni, it is old enough. A Malay, I would say that's not a problem. Still eligible. Because Rahman and Balmum is from Damas. If it would have only told us that a Balmum is a problem, say, well, that's disgusting for Hashem. It doesn't mean like disgusting. It means that it's not appropriate. Aval Mechusus Man Dilemma, but being too young, that's not inappropriate. It's just too young. And here it's not slaughtered. A Malay. I would say they're not so tzricha, so it needs both of them. Rava Amar, on top of Samach Dalet, Rava Amar Kegain Shahaya Leichela B'Teich Beisai. It's a wild teretz. I did not see this one coming. Okay. Rava says, the fellow that sold the Beis Hamikdash, the Karban, he happens to have this whole flock. Now, what he did was, on Yom Kippur, he slaughtered an animal. On Yom Kippur, you don't let it slaughter. But he did, because he had someone in his family that was dangerously ill. So he slaughtered an animal for this dangerously ill patient that was in his household. Now, which animal of all animals did he choose? He chose the mother of the Sarah Mishtaleah. Now, we have a rule that you can't kill a mother and the child in the same, you can't slaughter mother and child in the same day. So, it becomes Mechusar Zman. So, what was our whole problem? The whole problem was, how are you going to get an animal that's eligible to be as a sacrifice, as a pair with an animal that's not eligible, and then you're going to do a lottery on it, and then it had to have been one or the other, and nevertheless, that would have been a good lottery when one of them clearly isn't eligible to be a sacrifice. How is that going to work? So now we're saying that what happened here is not that there was any problem with the lottery. They were both eligible. But it turns out that when did the shechita take place? After the Geirel. They did the lottery. After the Geirel, 2 goats were there. They're not brothers. They're cousins. One's not being shechted. So, yeah, but we're learning now that it's mechusar zman. It needed to be eligible. We're learning that mechusar zman is a problem even for the Sorla Zazel. Yeah, but I would have thought without the pasuk that it was not a problem. So all of this is discussion is what would I have thought without the pasuk, and then how is it possible? Right. Yeah, the mother's larger than the child. No, they didn't pick a mother and a child. They picked two goats that are the same age. And both of them are perfectly fine. The age, everything is fine. But all of a sudden, after the everything is set in the base of Migdash, that one is a sacrifice and one's going to help, the fellow that stole the animal to the base of Migdash now shechts one of his goats of his flock. It turned out that was the mother of the one that was going to be Lazazel. It's Mechusar Zman. If without the pasuk I would have said everything is fine, comes along the pasuk that says there's a problem. No. It not just the person. It's on the animal. Yeah, you have to be careful. Yeah, you have to be careful. Usually, you don't have a problem except when it's Erev Yom Tov. Except Erev Yom Tov, because usually we assume that the animal wasn't. You don't have to assume that was the mother of the child shechted today. Okay. V'shachar imei b'yom kippurim. The Gemara says. I think everyone was thinking of this. Is pushing an animal off a cliff considered a prohibition of not slaughtering a mother and the child in the same day? You're not even slaughtering it, you're just pushing it off the cliff. Turns out, Amri B'Marava, they said in Eretz Yisrael that pushing it off the cliff is considered a shechita. Yeah. How did he shecht it? The other person shechted the animal because he had a chayla b'tayich b'esa. Someone was sick that needed meat. As I told you, I didn't see this one coming. This was not.
The provision for slaughtering the mother and the child, whatever. It's all only for commandment.
No, it's not only for commandment. It's for any shechita.
So what about the one where like your mother is pregnant?
That's not a problem.
Yeah, so it's eating each other.
But it's one shechita. Yeah. The pasuk says the father. That was a Gemara schooling discussed, but it's not necessarily known the father, right? Azazel is a place. Yeah, in modern Hebrew, hell, right? Azazel. The one that sacrificed, that's not the one that sacrificed to Hashem. That's the one that's pushed off the cliff. The other one is the sacrifice. That's what it seems, yeah. Like? Yeah. Say, my old cousin said, so Zog in hell is nicht so yeah. Schicken jenem Zartnik. It says to say hell is okay, but to send someone there, that you're not allowed to do. Okay. How far away? That we're going to see. That's coming up shortly in the Gemara. It was a walk. That's coming up. Oh, yeah. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It describes. We have some description of it. Im shel shem mace. If the one that was, we're quoting the Mishnah again. The Mishnah said that if one of the animals died, then what to do? So if the animal that died was the one that the girl fell on it, that it was going to be the sacrifice. So, you should say the Yomar. Him shall say mace. He should say. He doesn't know which one died. It says if it was the one that was for the carbon died, so then the one that falls on the for the new girl would be in its place. And if Azazel died, then the one that falls for Azazel will be in its place. Okay. It's whatever was meant to be. Amar Rav. Sheni Shebezuk Sheni Yikrav. Let's go back. Let's see what's going on. I now have 3 sacrifices. I had a pair, but one of them died. And I didn't do the girl yet. I didn't do the lottery. I need another 2 animals here, and then I do the lottery. And I say in the lottery that if the one that died was the one that was supposed to be for Lashem, so here it will be a replacement. And if the one that was for Azazel died, then this will be its replacement. And then what do? Then I have now 2 animals here, and I'm going to use those 2 animals. The problem is that there's really 3 animals. So what do I do with the third one? It says v'hasheni, that third animal, you just wait till it gets a month, and then you're going to sell it. And what will you do with the money? It's going to go to the fund in the temple, which they use to keep the sacrifices when the temple is empty. Okay, now the question is, though, when you have 3 and you're choosing 2, which one gets left out? So Rav says that I'm leaving out the new one. I'm only using one from the new pair, but not both from the new pair. Sheni shebezug rishon yikrav, sheni shebezug sheni, but the second one, yira, that's the one that you leave to get a month. Rabbi Yochanan says, sheni shebezug rishon yira, sheni shebezug sheni yikrav, exactly the opposite. Sheni shebezug rishon yira. I'm only using the new animals. The first animal that was left over from the lottery, from the first pair, rather, that gets left out. That I leave to get a month.
Even though it's already been designated.
Yeah. The Micah Miflagi, what's the machlekes? Look at the machlekes. Rav saver balechayim eina nidachim. Rav says that balechayim, if an animal that's alive, never gets rejected. This was designated. It's not rejected. I'm going to use that one was first. Rabbi Yochanan saver balechayim nidachim. Rabbi Yochanan says that live animals do get rejected. How is it rejected? Because its pair had died. My time at the Rav. What's the reason for Rav? The Aleph from Mechusar Zman. He learns from Mechusar Zman. Let's see. Mechusar Zman. What's by Mechusar Zman when it's not eligible because it's too young? Lav afagav the hashtalei chazi. Ki hadar mechsi shaprit hami. Good proof. What's a Mechusar Zman? If an animal is designated before the time that it's eligible to be brought because it was too young, so you wait till it's old enough and then you bring it. See, it wasn't rejected. So here too, an animal that's alive doesn't get rejected. So too over here it doesn't get rejected. The Gemara says, "Me dummy." Is that a comparison? Over there, it was never eligible, and you just had to wait for it to be eligible. Here, you had a carbon that was eligible and got rejected because its pair died. So this is worse. Ella, the time of the Rav, we need a different reason of Rav. The Yalaf mi bal mum over. There is a concept of a temporary mum, a temporary blemish. So bal mum over lav afgav lechazi hashta. Even though right now it's uneligible, but kihadar mechzi, when it does become eligible, shaper dami. So hachanami leishna. Once it the blemish goes off, then you could bring it as a sacrifice. Gemara says, "V'hasam minalan." Where do you know that you can bring a sacrifice that had a temporary mum? Eksiv ki mashchasam behem mum bam. Because how do they translate mashchasam, man? It's like corrupt or something. Corruption. It has a mum. Mum bam hudala yiratzu. If it while it has the mum, it's not an appeasement to Hashem. However, mum and yiratzu. But once the mum is gone, you could bring it. See, it doesn't get rejected just because it was temporarily invalid. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Mi'it rachmana behem." It says, "Kimashchasam behem." It's a corruption in them. It says, "In them, heimhu dechiyavar mum and yiratzu." That's a special exemption. Ha kol dechoyim hayol v'nitchu nitchu. But when it comes to anything else, once it's invalid for good. The Rav, what does Rav say? Rav says that that's only if it's not mixed in with other things. That's when it's going to be a problem when it has a mum. But if it's mixed in with other things, it's going to be eligible as well, even with the mum. Let's leave it over here. We'll do we'll go over this Rav Hubeinayu. Okay.
Yeah. Good job.